I got divorced from my wife because she wanted to give our daughter the last name of her deceased ex-partner. My wife and I struggled for a long time to conceive a child due to an injury I suffered in my youth, but after 3 years, we finally had a daughter. 3 weeks ago, she and my wife returned from the hospital, both healthy. Since then, I've been sleeping on the couch because of an argument over the baby's last name. Before our marriage, my wife was in a long-term relationship with a man who passed away due to mental health issues after serving overseas. She has a 12-year-old son from him, and he carries his father's last name. Now my wife wants our daughter to have that same last name. She herself still uses her ex's last name, partly so her son doesn't feel out of place in the family and partly because, in her opinion, it sounds better than mine. I tried to find a compromise. I suggested that since I've practically raised her son, he could take my last name so he wouldn't feel left out, and she could take my last name too. But she refused, saying her son has always had his father's last name and doesn't need to change it for my sake. She explained that the children have different fathers, so it's normal for them to have different last names. Then I proposed giving our daughter my wife's maiden name hyphenated with mine. Her son could then carry his mother's maiden name along with her ex's last name, so the kids' names would be somewhat similar. She rejected that too. The name registration was supposed to happen on Thursday. I suggested temporarily registering our daughter under my last name and going to family therapy, but she refused, insisting that this is her child, she carried and gave birth to her, so she should make the decision alone. I asked her son how he felt about his sister having a different last name. He said he didn't care because he knows who his father is, but he also considers me a dad. I told my wife about this, but she accused me of manipulating her son. 5 days ago, we had a fierce argument, after which we barely spoke. I didn't want to keep fighting, especially since this should have been the happiest time for us. 2 days ago, I gave her an ultimatum: either the child gets my last name or we divorce. I told her, maybe your late husband can help you raise our daughter, since you don't even want to acknowledge me as her father. She called me a manipulator and said it's unfair that she can't choose both the first name and the last name for our daughter. When she was pregnant, all her name suggestions were feminine versions of her ex's name: Alexia, Alexandra, Alexis, in honor of Alexander, her ex's name. If it had been a boy, she wanted to name him exactly after her ex. Today, I called a lawyer and she overheard it. Now she's accusing me of backing her into a corner over the last name, even though we ended up choosing her preferred first name for our daughter, with my name as just the middle name. To clarify for an American audience, in the US, people often have a middle name, like John Michael Smith, where John is the first name, Michael is the middle name, and Smith is the last name. It's not the same as a patronymic, it's just a cultural thing. I just want an outside opinion. Am I really doing the right thing, or have I ruined my life over something trivial? My wife is 43. She used her maiden name for most of her life but has been using her late ex's last name for the past 10 years. Legally, she only changed it 6 years ago when we started dating. I didn't mind back then because I thought it was for her son's sake, but now I realize she kept it not just for him but because she likes it more than mine. When we discussed marriage, she refused to take my last name because she thinks mine is boring. At the time, I didn't care. Our relationship was decent. There was a period without intimacy, but we worked it out without therapy. She always praised how well I cared for her son, but she wouldn't let me officially adopt him. That caused some conflict, but I let it go to keep the peace. When we were trying to have a child, our relationship felt more like roommates, but we both desperately wanted a baby. When we found out it was a girl, we were thrilled because she'd always dreamed of having a daughter. We argued about names, but it wasn't a big deal until I realized she wanted to name our daughter after her late ex. Quick update: after my inbox got flooded with requests, here's the latest. I contacted the registration office and learned that if the parents are married, only one parent is needed to register the child's name. I decided to try reasoning with my wife and set up a meeting with her parents, my parents, and the parents of her late ex. Her sister joined too. During the discussion, it became clear that only my parents and my 3 siblings supported me in believing that our daughter's last name should either be mine or my wife's maiden name. Her family, including her parents, sister, and other relatives, backed her, arguing that since she carried and gave birth to the child, the decision should be hers alone. To my shock, the parents of her late ex not only supported her in giving our daughter their last name but also revealed the truth about her name choice. The name I had approved wasn't just a feminine version of her ex's name, it was the exact name her ex had wanted for a daughter if he'd ever had one. When this came up, she blushed. I asked her point blank, "Do you think it'd be fair to name our daughter after one of my exes?" She shot back that I'd only had 3 exes, 2 of them with the same name, and both names were awful. After everyone left, I tried talking to her, but she slammed the bedroom door in my face and locked it. During the conversation with her parents, I also asked them, "If I officially adopt your grandson, could his last name be changed to mine?" They flatly refused, saying they wouldn't allow either the adoption or a name change. So I asked, "Then why do you think it's fair for my daughter to carry your last name?" They said their grandson is closer to his sister than I am to her as a father and that the kids should share the same last name. They also mocked my choice of middle name and last name for our daughter. Up until this point, I'd had a perfectly decent relationship with these people, I'd raised their grandson like my own son, but now I saw how they really felt about me. The next morning, my wife didn't come out of the room. I left breakfast by her door, hoping she'd calm down so we could talk before the registration. Later, her friends started calling me, asking why it mattered so much that the baby have my last name, since it's 2023, well, now 2025, but this was back then. I explained my side, but they still thought I was being unreasonable. 2 days before the registration, on Tuesday, she started another fight and declared that our daughter would get the name she originally wanted, a feminine version of her ex's name. She went so far as to say, "I'd rather die than let our daughter have your last name." I'm ashamed to admit it, but in that moment, I called the police, saying she was threatening to harm herself. I'm not proud of it. The police came and took her away despite her protests. She was fine. It was just an emotional outburst, but I said I didn't feel it was safe to leave her with the baby. In the end, I registered our daughter's name without her while she was still at the station. Now our daughter has the first name, middle name, and last name I chose. Obviously, my wife has serious psychological issues, and I hope she gets the help she needs. After they took her, she asked her parents to pick up her son and our daughter until she was released. Her ex's parents showed up and tried to take my child. I told them to get lost. They threatened to call the police and I said, "Go ahead." In the end, they only took her son and left. Over the weekend, her parents came to my place and demanded I hand over the baby, saying I shouldn't make things harder. I refused. After that, a nurse and a social worker visited us. When my wife was discharged, she didn't come home, she went to her parents' place. She's been living there since but has tried twice to take our daughter. I changed the locks. She keeps sending breast milk for the baby through her sister. I've filed for divorce. For now, the baby stays with me because even social services said that, given my wife's mental state, it's safer for the child to be with me. Our marriage is beyond saving. I doubt she ever really loved me. Since all this started, a lot of other things have come up. I'll always love her son and hope that when he grows up and can make his own choices, he'll come back to me. But as my lawyer said, don't count on it too much. Right now, my older brother and his wife are living with me to help with my daughter. They have 5 kids, all teenagers now, and they've been through this plenty of times. I'm taking all their advice.